There's a lot to be said about this installment in the trilogy, so I decided to summarize as many points as I could. This title did something different than the last two titles. It's completely open world and never forces you to do quests or areas in a specific order, which is nice, but causes problems later down the line. First up is the sound and graphics. I want to keep this short as there isn't much to talk about. Visually the game looks good, but no better than the previous titles in the series, so there isn't anything that stands out or worth mentioning. Sound is another issue, since there isn't anything to talk about again. The only notable thing is the heavy footsteps returned from the earlier games, and could be annoying to certain people. The main mechanic in this game is that there's a timer slowly ticking away until the world ends. You can extend this timer by completing quests, which grants you erratia and stats. The new mechanic worked really well considering the new gameplay style, so I really have no issues with that. The timer does make the game feel rushed though, since it's a permanent timer which prevents you from wandering, exploring, or grinding, which are traditional staples of normal RPGs, or at least JRPGs if nothing else. The balance for it is that there's only 4 areas, and none of them are really big, so you don't have to wander too far to find any one thing, although some items in the world for certain quests are a little obscure and difficult to find. The balance for grinding is that the monsters are limited in quantity. When you kill enough of them, they stop spawning, and that works really well. Unfortunately, this means that you really don't care about killing them because the stats aren't even linked to leveling up, they're linked to the quest. This makes combat feel more like a hindrance and occasionally not worth doing unless it's strictly mandated for the quest that you have to complete. The new combat system is actually really fun and shares similar features to the paradigm system from Final Fantasy XIII and the Garma Grid from Final Fantasy X-2. While I do like the new combat system, I actually didn't like it until later in the game, which is unfortunate because it's really good. Early on, you have very few skills or garbs and really low-level weapons, which makes enemies really difficult, and oftentimes on normal I found them unforgiving and I wanted to quit. Since you can go anywhere at any time, all areas have to be similar in difficulty. This raised the issue of them all being hard early, but too easy later in the game. Later on, however, the game becomes so easy that nothing really challenges you, including many of the boss and optional fights. I found most bosses incredibly easy late game, which was unfortunate because the early bosses were unforgiving and made me want to kill small woodland animals. I attribute these problems to the game being open world, not having a normal scale of difficulty. Finally, I have 3 issues that plagued me the entire time I was playing the game. I'm going to go over them one at a time and make sure I cover them as best as I can. First is the overuse of the number 13. I get it, the game is named 13. It's in the other 2 titles as well. Unfortunately, they throw it in everywhere they can, especially early on when it's very annoying and abundant. It's in quests, it's in the title, people come back on that day, the world is ending on that day. It's such a prominent number and it just becomes a dead horse, just gets beaten to death for absolutely no reason. Second, and this is a bigger issue, is the blatant disregard for the Final Fantasy XIII universe and the characters within. The game brings back every possible character from earlier titles and throws them in your face, as if to say, hey, you know this guy, right? You like him, right? Well look, he's in this game. I'm okay with that. This is acceptable if left alone as it is. However, after meeting each character again, you're treated to a short monologue on how Lightning knows them from the previous games. This is where it becomes an issue. I understand the desire to reintroduce them to new players, but let's be honest, nobody went into this game without playing the first 2 titles. This pissed me off every time I met another character because it made me feel like the developers and writers thought I was retarded and would have forgotten major characters from other games. Finally is the character of Lightning herself. Throughout the game, she points out that God took her motions so she wouldn't feel compelled by them when doing his bidding, which makes sense given some of the tasks that she's forced to do. However, on numerous occasions, she makes comments or performs actions that are clearly what someone with emotions would do. The only time that she actually feels emotionless is when she's talking to her would-be sister. Then she acts like she doesn't care. To me, this feels like Dead Space 1. Throughout the entire game, you're shown images of the main character's girlfriend to try and make you feel bad for him and what may have happened. However, he doesn't speak the entire game. Therefore, you can't associate to him because it's like trying to feel bad for a mannequin. It just doesn't work that well. With 13.3, it feels the same. When Lightning goes into emotionless robot mode, I can't be bothered to care about her story or what she's doing. Which ultimately leads me to this question. If Lightning doesn't care, why should I? I will say that despite my complaints, I did enjoy the game and highly recommend it to fans of the 13 universe, if for no other reason than to get closure on the story that's been going on for a few years. That being said, because of the open world and forced timer, it doesn't feel so much like a Final Fantasy game as it does another random RPG I picked out of a bin. With that, I will say that this is by far the weakest title in the series, so take that for what you will.